Hey everyone, welcome back. This is a continuation to the video that I did on CORS topic long ago. And in that video, I explained how you can resolve the CORS issue using some client-side tools like the Chrome extension and a third-party server that can add that CORS header for you when you make the API calls. So in this video, I want to talk about another approach that you can use and the ideal way to handle this problem in real world. So the solutions that I discussed in the previous video are more like quick fixes to get over the problem immediately, but those are not the appropriate way to handle things. So in this video I'll show you the right way to handle this issue, and let's get started. Okay, so what you see on the screen is the architecture of the code in our previous video. Again, I suggest you to watch the previous video before you watch this one, because you have to understand the things that were explained in that video to truly appreciate what we do in this one. Okay, so what you see on the screen is the architecture of the previous code. I'll quickly run through it before we talk about the solution in the current video. Okay, so what we did is we tried to call Binance API from a local HTML page. So we sent a request to the Binance server and we get a response back. And because our local HTML file always points to the local host, which is 127.0.0.1, and the API, Binance API, it points to api.binance.com. So these two are of different origin. So the Chrome browser treats it as a cross-origin request and therefore prevents us from accessing it, and it throws the CORS error. So we had to use a Chrome extension to add this access control allow origin header on the response, or we had to use a middleware third-party server to handle this. So those are the two solutions that we used in the previous video. So one of the reason in making this video is because someone posted a comment in that one asking, why can't we just add the response header in the code itself? So we can't do that, because we can add headers. So whatever headers we add on the client side code, they are added on the request, and we cannot add any headers directly on the response, because the response comes from the Binance server directly. So if we have to do anything, we have to do it directly on the Binance side. And of course, so we don't control the Binance server, correct? Those are handled by the Binance development team. So we don't have any control to do it. So we cannot add any headers on the response from the client side code. So that is my main intent in making this video. So how can we handle it properly if we cannot add any headers on the response from the client side code? Well, let's see how to do it. Okay, so we'll use the architecture shown below as opposed to the one above in this video. So what we'll do is we'll use an intermediate server to handle the API calls for us. So I'll quickly explain how this works. So instead of directly calling the Binance server, we'll call this intermediate server, and because this is a server, we can either add response headers, we have full control on the request and response. So on this intermediate server, we can add the CORS header and send the response back to the client. So that way it doesn't throw out any errors. So let me show you the actual data flow as to how this would work. Okay, so this is how the data flow would look like. It might look a bit intimidating at first glance, but it's really not. It's really simple. So what we do is from the client side code, we send a request to the intermediate server, and this intermediate server would send the request for us to the Binance server. Okay, and then the Binance would send the response back, and we'll add the CORS header on the intermediate server and send the response back to the client. So by the time we get the response to the client, we'll have the data and the header, so it would work properly on the client. So this is the right way to handle things, and it might look intimidating looking at the architecture, but it's really simple. So you can create the server in under 10 minutes, and it would be under 10 lines of code. It's really that simple. So let's get started with the code. So what we'll do is we'll first create this intermediate server and we'll write the code, and once we are finished with this, we'll write the client side code. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so I'm in the folder. I'll create a new folder. I'll call it intermediate server. Okay, and let me go to that folder first using command prompt. So I'm already in that folder. I'll just say cd intermediate server and it'll take me to that folder. Okay, so now what we are going to do is we are going to create a node server in this folder, and it's just a bunch of commands that you have to install, and you have to write like 10 lines of code to create the server. It's really simple. So let's get started with how to create the server. Okay, so first what we'll do is we'll say npm init -- y. So npm init -- y. So this will initialize the packages.json file. So this file it keeps track of some modules that will install on the node side. Okay, so, and if you go to the folder, you can see, if I expand this, you can see packages.json, and yeah, let's go. We are already in this folder, right? So we have to install some modules for this to work. So first we are going to install Express. Express is sort of a request handler, so to speak. So you'll understand Express when we actually write the code. Okay, and then we'll have to install another module called request promise, and this is to make the API calls, to call the Binance server and handle those API calls. And we also have to install another module which is CORS, and this is to add the CORS header that we saw here. So we have to add this header, correct? So we have to install this module to add that header. So let's get going with the installation. So first let me copy this. If you click here, it gets copied automatically. So I go to the here, I'll clear everything. I'll say init --save. So if you hit --save, it'll save the packages locally. Okay, it's save, and it takes a minute to install, maybe less than a minute. Okay, so this is done. If you go to your folder, you can see node module. So this folder gets created when you install packages, and if you see packages.json, you see Express installed, dependencies Express. So all this packages.json file does is it keeps track of all the modules that you need, all the dependencies that you need to run the server. Okay, so then we need to install another module which is request promise. So let's install that. Let me copy this. Okay, install. This will install it. Alright, along with this we have to install another module which is a dependency for request promise, and it's provided in the documentation here. I know this already, that's why I'm running it, but you can go through the documentation to understand all the dependent modules. So let me install the dependent module. Say npm, it's a request. Yeah, so this request is a dependent module to request promise, and I know that by reading this documentation. So I'll install it. Again, I'll leave a link for all these links in the description box. Okay. Okay, this is installed. Next we have to install CORS. I'll copy this. That's it. So we have installed all the 4 modules. Now we can get going with the code. Let's wait for this module to get installed. Awesome, it's done. If I hit CLS, then the page gets refreshed. If I go back to my page, you can see under the dependencies section, I'm not sure if you can see this clearly. Yeah, I think now it's clearly visible. You can see under dependencies we have all the modules that are installed. Okay. Now here we have to create another file called index.js. Okay, and that is where we'll write the actual code. Okay, so I'll just say new file index.js. Okay, so here let's first import the modules that we need. Okay, first we need request, right? Request, we can do that by using a require function. Require request promise. Okay, next if I hit Control D, I can duplicate the line. Okay, so now I'll import another one, CORS. Okay, and that would be CORS module. Okay, and then I'll also import Express. Okay, and that would be Express module, and then I'll import another module. Okay, not now. Yeah, these are the 3 that we need. and then we have to create a server, right? It's very simple, just one line of code. App is equal to express, okay, and then and then we have to listen to a port. So if you want to understand the difference between an IP address and a port, so IP address points to your machine. So you have this running on your laptop, right? So your laptop would have a unique IP address, and port represents different processes running on your IP address. So on your IP you might have, you might have opened a notepad, or you might be running Chrome, or you might be running several processes. Each unique process would have a unique port number, okay? So that's a quick explanation of what a port number is. So let's create a server. Server is equal to app.listen, and listen to 3000 port. So now we are listening to 3000 port, okay, and we can pass an anonymous function to see that the server started properly. So I'll just say console.log, and here we can pass a message that gets logged when we start the server to know that the server is working fine. I'll say listening to port 3000. Okay, let's try to start the server once and see if it's working fine or not. Okay, so to do that, we go to the command prompt and say node index.js. Okay, so we hit enter. We should see that listening to port 3000. So the code is fine. Okay, that's it. In just 5 lines of code, this is empty line. In just 5 lines of code, you're able to start the server. Okay, now we have to write the code to handle the API calls. Okay, so the way, let's go back to this diagram. So the way this would work is we have to create different paths in the intermediate server to handle different API calls. Okay, and to demonstrate this, I'll use the Exchange Info API, the Binance Exchange Info API, which is a public endpoint, so I don't need to handle any authentications to call it. So let's demonstrate that using Exchange Info. Okay, so for that, I'll create a new path, and I'll call that path get/get exchange info. Okay, and let me write the code and then explain so that you understand it clearly. Okay, so what this means is, whenever on the browser, when I call this path, then this function module gets executed. Okay, so let's write a sample function module and see what it really means. Okay, so I'll just create this function module. I want to demonstrate this to clearly explain what it means. Okay, and this function module has 2 parameters, which is request and then response. Okay, REQ and RES. Okay, and then it's response.send. Received request, whatever. Okay, so I just want to send this response whenever someone calls this. Okay, let's see if this works or not. Okay, so whenever we send a request to this path, this function module gets executed, and in this function module we're returning this response. So response.send means that we are returning this text message back to the client. Okay, so let's start the server again and see if this works or not. Node index.js. Okay, so the server started properly. Now I go back to my page, and okay, so this is the info, right? So I have this open. Let me refresh the page. Okay, so when I refresh the page, you can see received request. So because it is listening to 3000, so when I open 127.0.0.1 3000 port, and when I call for this path exchange info, I get this request. So if I call for any other command, exchange info, if I say get whatever xyz, just some random command, I won't get anything. Cannot get, because this path does not exist. So we can only call the paths that are coded in our program. Okay, so for now we are only writing this get exchange info, so I'll just put it as get exchange info. Okay, and we'll get this received request. Okay, now let's write the code to handle the API calls for us. Let's call the Binance API and send the response back. Okay, so to do that, I'll use the request module that we imported here. So request dot then dot catch. So this is the structure for any promise. Okay, and so inside the request we pass the parameters that we want, and so the first parameter is method. It's a get method. Okay, and then we have to pass the URL. okay, and URL would be the Binance exchange info. So this is the exchange info URL, okay, and you can open it on your browser too. So you see api.binance.com and exchange info URL. So I'll just copy and paste it here. Okay, we get this URL, and then we have to pass another parameter, resolve with full response. Yes, this one. This is, we set this to true, okay, and we do this generally if we want to know the URL and all the other settings. Again, I don't want to get into this code in detail, but all you need to know is we are just calling the Binance API from here, okay, and when we get the response back, the code that we specify under the then module gets executed. So I'll say R1 and I'll say response dot send, okay, send. I just have to send the response back, right? R1 dot body. Yeah, that's it. So inside the R1 dot body, we have the response back from this API, and all we are doing is we're just sending the response back to the client. Okay, so let's see if this works or not. So let's restart the server and see if it works or not. I'll restart the server. Go back to the web page. Now if I hit refresh, okay, we get the response. Let me zoom back. Yeah, so we do get the response back, right? And the reason you see this all in the text format is because generally when we get the response back, it is in the string format. So if we do a json.parse, if we convert it to JSON, then we get the data all formatted. Let me hit refresh. Okay, I have to restart the server. And now let me zoom it 100%. Yeah. Okay, now let me refresh the page. Now you should see everything structured. Yeah. So now it's formatted in the JSON format. Yeah. So now it looks like a JSON. So it works, right? So this is, so the code works. Let me let's go back to the diagram and explain what we did. So we created an intermediate server, and we called the Binance server, and we got the response back from the Binance server. We haven't added the CORS yet, but we just pasted we are just sending the response back to the client. That's what we did, right? So now we didn't have any client level code as such, but we're directly calling the API from the browser. We'll write the code for the client in a moment, but I just want to demonstrate that the server works properly. Okay. Now if you go to the network tab and expand it, if this is where we see all the requests and their headers and everything, right? Body and all those details. So let me refresh it again and see what we get, right? This is the API. If we go to here, if we look at the response headers, you don't see this access control allow origin header, right? We don't see that header because we haven't added any header yet, right? But you might be wondering, how come this works even though we did not add any header, right? The reason it works is because you're calling, the URL that you're calling is 127.0.0.1, right? And the URL where the server is running is again localhost 3000 port. So those two are of the same origin. That is the reason the CORS policy does not apply in this case. So it still works. So technically you can still use this approach to run the code, but when you try to deploy this code on any server, then this would fail, right? As long as you run it locally like this, it will work. But if you try to deploy it on another Ubuntu server that you buy online, it would fail. So that is the reason the proper way to do it is to add that CORS code as well. So let's apply that CORS header and see if we get that header here or not. Notice this, there is no access control allow origin header yet. So let's add it. So it's very simple to add. All you have to do is say app.use CORS. That's it. Sorry. Yeah, that's it. That's all you have to do. Let's try to restart the server and see. Again, to terminate the server, you have to hit Ctrl+C. That terminates the server. And let's restart it again. Node index.js. Yeah. Let's go back to the page. Let's hit refresh again, and under the network tab, this is the request, and you still don't see the CORS header. Let me check and get back to you really. Okay, the mistake that I did is I should add it before this exchange info. Okay, so let's restart. Let's restart again, Control C, and then node index.js. Okay, and refresh again. Okay, let's go to this. You see this access control allow origin star. So now the header works, right? If you deploy the code on any third-party server, like on any Ubuntu server, this would still work because we are adding this header in the code, right? I can comment this line and restart the server, and you would see that header will disappear. Control C, node index. Yeah, I go back to the server, hit refresh. Yeah, if I click here, you see the header is gone now. It's no longer there. So I think you understood the point. So we can just add the CORS header by using this extension. So now we are done with the intermediate server code. So all we did is we created a path called getExchangeInfo, and in that path we're calling the Binance server, and we get the response back from the Binance server, and we're adding the header, adding the CORS header, which is access control allow origin header, and then we are sending the response back. Now all we have to do is write the code for the client side code. So we cannot, so we just directly called it on the browser, right? We cannot do this every single time. So the right way to do it is to create a client HTML file and call it from there. So let's do that. So I'll create a new file. I'll call it client.html. I don't think we have to create it here. We have to create it outside. Let me delete this. Yeah. Let me expand this. Yeah, I have to create it here. I don't know. That's okay. We can create it anywhere. Let me. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. HTML. Let me initialize the HTML file, and I'll add a script tag. And inside the script tag, let me just copy that function module that I've been using in all my other programs that simplifies all the API calls, and I'll be right back. Alright, I copied the function module. Let's call that API. So remember, now we are not calling the Binance server. So we'll call this intermediate server. Okay, so let's create a base URL for that. So I'll say BURL is equal to, so our base URL is this one, right? Let's go back to the server. And yeah, this is the base URL, correct? 127.0.1. Yes, and let's call the function. So request dot then dot catch. Okay, so in the request we have two parameters, which is the method get, and we have the URL. Okay, so the URL will be the base URL plus, so if you see here, we have this slash get exchange info. Okay, that's what we do. So we call this URL, and then when we get the response back, we can call it, get the response back, this piece of code gets executed. Okay, so I'll say R1. For now, I'm just going to paste the response on the console. Okay, so I'll say console.log. The actual response stays in R1.target.response text. Yeah, response text. Okay, and it's going to be in a string format, so I'll do a JSON parse. Yeah, to convert this to JSON format, and I'm just pasting it on the console. Okay, and this catch is for handling any errors. I'll just paste it on the console again. Console.log error. Yeah, that's it. So what we're doing is we're calling this intermediate server, and this get exchange info is coming from this path. Okay, get exchange info, and because it's a get API, this is where we specify that it's a get API. So here we specify get, and then when we get the response back, we're pasting it on the console. Okay, so I think the server is still running. Let's go back to the client and open this page. We hit F12, developer tools, go to console, and let's hit refresh. Okay, so you see no access control allow origin header is present, and therefore the request is blocked, right? CORSB blocked. So you see that the CORS policy on the browser is blocking this request, right? So all we have to do is go back to the client, go back to our intermediate server, and it's enabled, but I think we did not restart the server. Let's restart the server and check again. Okay, you see that? That's great. So now if you go to the network tab, you see access control allow origin. So the header is added. That's why we did not get that CORS error, right? And the data is inside this. You see exchange filters, rate limits, symbols. So the data we got it perfectly. So no issues. Let's check it again. So if I comment it out and if I restart the server, again, the reason I'm doing this multiple times is so that you understand what is really happening behind the scenes. Okay, I'll restart the server, and if I hit refresh, okay, CORS policy blocked it, right? Now if I just close it and let me uncomment the code and restart the server. Yeah. Now if I go back to the page and refresh, boom, we get the response back. And if you go to the network tab, get exchange info, we get this, right? And access control allow origin star. So this is present. So that's how that's the right way to do it. So I think now it's pretty clear for you. So on the client side, on the client level code, let me go back to this page and explain clearly. Yeah. So this is our client level code, right? So here we're calling this get exchange info API, get exchange info path, and on the intermediate server, we define this get exchange info path, and in the get exchange info path we are calling the Binance server. We get the response back here, and then we added the CORS header, and then we are sending the response back. So that's why on the client, when we get the response back, we are just pasting it on the console. Okay, so yeah, I think it's pretty clear, you know, what's happening right now. So let's do one last thing. Okay, let's do a couple of things right now. So let's see how laggy. So in the previous architecture, we directly called the Binance server, right? But now we are using an intermediate server. So I want to see how much lag there is because we are using a third server, right? So because we are passing through multiple servers, it should take more time. So I want to see, you know, what is the lag in between these two requests. What if we directly call the server, or in the case we are calling this intermediate server? So let's see how the lag is. So I'll create a new variable. I'll call it var start is equal to new. Sorry, I'll set date dot now. So date dot now will give the current time in milliseconds. Okay, so that's the start time, and here I'll calculate the difference, right? Console.log. Okay, and date.now minus start. Yeah, so this tells me the difference between the time we made the request and the time we got the response back. So this calculates the time in milliseconds as to how long it took for the request to get executed. Okay, the server is still running. Let me refresh the page and see what happens. This is the console. We hit refresh. Let me first comment out this other line. Yeah, I'm just commenting out this response. Let me hit refresh. Yeah, it takes 1147 seconds. So that's milliseconds. So it's 1.147 seconds for the request to get executed, right? So now let's directly call the Binance server and see how long it will take. Okay, so I'll just copy this, and all I have to do is I'll just duplicate this line. Okay, I'll comment it out and I'll just paste it here. Yeah, okay, and it might fail due to CORS policy, but let's see if it how long it will take. I'll just add it. Okay, I'll just turn it on here. Yeah, switch on. Let me hit refresh. It's 268, right? So because I added this, turned on this extension, it worked. So you can see the difference, right? So if I directly call the server, it takes just 0.26 seconds, so which is pretty fast. But if I'm using an intermediate server, it takes 1.147 seconds. So it's like, there's definitely a lag associated with it, but I think 1 second is, it's up to you. So it depends on your requirements and how your trading style to define whether 1 second lag is something to worry about, or it's fine. Yeah, let me comment it out. I just wanted to show you how much lag there is when we call it differently, when we directly call it or when we use the intermediate server. Okay. All right, so one last thing that I want to do before we close this video is, what if we have to pass any parameters, right? So the first API that we tested is getExchangeInfo, and this API does not have any parameters, right? So it was easy to call. But what if you have some parameters and you need to pass those parameters from the client side, right? So the code that I showed you does not pass any parameters, right? It's just a server, it's just a URL, right? So I'll show you just one last one before we wrap up this video as to how to handle parameters when we design this intermediate server. Okay, so I'm going to use candlestick information. So we'll use K-line candlestick data API, and it has two mandatory parameters. One is symbol and the interval. So this gives you the candlestick data, and we have to specify which symbol we want and what is the time frame, 1 minute, 5 minutes, or what it is. So we'll write the code for this one. Okay, so first let's go back to the server, and I'll create a new path. I'll call it get candlestick data. Okay, and I'm going to create a function module. I'll say get K-line data, whatever. Okay, I'll create this function module here. Okay, and I'll just copy this code. You can see that I did not specify error. That's okay, we can do it, but the right practice is to write the code for error like this, ERR. Yeah, just in case if there is any network error or Binance is down, on all those stuff. Okay, so here the way we would do it is, when we call this from the client side, we will pass those parameters in the URL, and here we have to decode those parameters and specify them properly when we call this when we call the K-line API. So I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so I'm going to use a global module called URL to get these parameters from the URL. Okay, so I'll first write the code and then explain so that you'll understand clearly. So let me import this module first. So var URL is equal to require and this one is a global module. So I don't have to install URL to be able to access a global module. And if you want to know which one is a global module and which one is not, you can go to the Node.js official website, and whatever modules you see on the left hand side, these are all global modules. So you don't need to install. So these are accessible by default on any Node.js code. So if you see, this is the URL, and I'm using this to parse the URL. Okay, so here I'm going to create a variable called input is equal to URL.parse. Yeah, parse. And here, so we get the request, right? We have two parameters, request and response. So it's a comma. Yeah. So the parameters are present in request.url. Okay, and true dot query. If you want to understand, so what this does is, if we pass the parameters from the client side, this is the client, right? So here we'll pass the parameters, and what this does is, it converts those parameters into a JSON format that we can access it directly. Okay, so if you want to know more about URL, you can read the documentation here. Okay, so let's go back to the Binance web page. This is the K-line API, right? So I'll just copy this API path, K-line, yeah, API, and then we have to pass the parameter, correct? Question mark. So we use question mark to separate the parameters. The first parameter is symbol is equal to sorry, symbol is equal to input. So again, so we are doing the conversion, right? So input dot symbol plus, we use ampersand to separate parameters. The second parameter is interval, so I'll say interval is equal to input dot interval. Okay, that's it. So we'll pass these symbol and interval from the client side, and we'll write that code after we do this. Okay, so we get the response back. So we're sending this, we're calling this K-lines API, we're passing symbol and interval, and then when we get the response back, we're just sending the response back. Okay, so let me close the server and restart it. Okay, now let's go try to access it from the web page. Okay, so this is the path, so I'll just copy this and paste it here. Now if I just hit enter, you'll get an error because you cannot pass the parameters properly. You don't get it error because, see, when we get any error, we're just logging it on the console, right? So we'll see the data here, so we'll see the error here. So the reason it failed is because we did not pass the mandatory parameters. Okay, so let's pass those. Okay, question mark symbol is equal to BTC USDT. I'm just calling BTC USDT, and then interval is equal to 1M. 1M means 1 minute. Okay, we hit enter. Now you should see the candlestick data. You see that we got the candlestick data. So when we pass symbol and interval here, that's what this line does. Okay, it identifies this URL and captures the symbol and interval in this input field, so that we can pass input.symbol and input.interval. Okay, and that's it. So we call this API and we get this response back. Now let's let's write the code to do that from the client side. Okay, so I'll just everything can remain the same. All we have to do is just change this path. Okay, so instead of get exchange info, we'll get what it is, get candlestick data, right? Get candlestick data, and then we have symbol is equal to BTC USDT, and interval is equal to 1M. Okay, that's it. So again, if I want to change this symbol to something else, then I have to change the code here as well. Okay, I don't want to confuse you with a lot of code changes, but you understand what I'm doing, right? I'm passing the symbol and interval here, and if you want to, if in the real world, you would have some kind of a form with input fields with the symbol and interval, and you would get the data from the form and call this API. But I'm just doing it like this because I want to convey, my focus is more on CORS part and not to show you how to build the form. So let's refresh the page and see if it works or not. Okay, I'm still pasting it like this. I'm just again, I did not, I still had the previous code here, so now I'm just logging it in the console. Let me refresh it. Awesome, so we get the response back, right? So yeah, it works. So that's pretty much it. I hope you found this informative, and the concepts that we discussed in this video are the proper way to handle CORS in real world. Okay, and the reason I did this video is because the old video that I did on CORS is my most watched video. So I want to do another one because I want to flesh out some more concepts and talk about those in detail, and show you a real world application as to how this would work in an ideal environment. So I hope you found this informative, and leave your thoughts and suggestions, or if any comments in the comment section below. And yeah, talk to you in the next one. Bye for now.